dreamers. Welcome to the very first episode of the Lost in Dreams podcast. I am your host, Dylan Menzie. My guest today is a bona fide Canadian treasure. You know him from Trailer Park Boys, his talk show Jonovision, and his award-winning podcast Taggart and Torrens, just to name a few. It is my deep pleasure to give you Jonathan Torrens. Hello, Jonathan Torrens. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I am so good. So good.
Why do I have one of those names that people think they always have to say my first and last name together? I don't have a short, like a nickname. I have a long name.
Right.
People are like, hey, Jonathan Torrens, how are you, man?
Yeah, the extended version.
Yeah,
why?
I don't know. I think it's because there's so many famous JTs out there.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And the arrival of our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, did nothing for my JT ranking in Canada alone.
So many. Well, you rank at least fourth on my list, so there you go.
Nice of you to say.
Yeah.
Crack the top 5 for something for once in my life.
Do you dream?
Well, I read somewhere that you dream every night, and the question is, do you remember your dreams? So I guess as a jumping off point, I suppose it depends on whether you believe that's true or if there's science to support that's true. I would believe you probably do dream every night. I don't remember them every night. My wife and I are kind of opposite dreamers. I dream what will hopefully never happen, and she'll be recounting her dreams and saying, it was the weirdest thing. We went to Sobeys and then had a barbecue at my parents' place. And I'm like, that's actually what we did.
Yeah.
So her dreams are kind of recaps of the previous day.
Right. She's living the dream.
Last time on at the start of a sitcom. Like that's what her dreams are. When I was in my 20s, I kept having the same recurring dream every night. And someone suggested I should write it down in a dream journal, which was repetitive. But I think some subconscious suggestion in my brain started getting me to wake up just to write down what the dream was.
Right.
And it was only when I stopped writing it down that I was able to sleep through the night again.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's really interesting. What was the dream?
I have inherited a completely irrational vermin phobia.
Whoa. Okay.
When my mom was in grade 2, she was wearing a dress with, a little rope belt around the waist. And the kid who sits behind her put a live mouse down her back. And so it ran laps around her midriff, and she couldn't quite grab it and get it out.
Ugh.
So I grew up in a house where, people were petrified of mice. So I've inherited that. And I was living in an apartment on Barrington Street while I was working on Street Sense years ago. And it had the odd mouse.
Right.
And so I dreamt about this mouse in my closet having babies.
Ugh.
Oh my God.
Gross.
So I guess worst nightmare sort of dream.
Yeah, like torment during real life and in dream world.
Yeah, and you wake up unsettled and in a cold sweat, that kind of dream.
Yeah.
How long did you have the dream for?
I'm going to say a few weeks, maybe a month. Yeah, but you know how the cumulative sleep loss starts to weigh on you after a while, and sleep should be something that we look forward to, that feels peaceful and is restorative.
Yeah.
So it's a really kind of weird feeling to be low-key dreading going to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like not having that sense of peace, like you said, like that relaxed state of.
Exactly.
Wow. You're the second person that I've interviewed for this podcast that has said that they had nightmares and reoccurring nightmares about vermin, except for it was rats.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, have you heard? I mean, I try. My mom had such an irrational fear that she would say things like, "Oh, every time you turn the TV on, there's a mouse on there," and I'm going to write them and tell them to stop showing mice on TV. Like, first of all, who is them that you're planning to write? Secondly, I think I have learned to manage this phobia a little better as the years have gone by. I tried imagining, if you see one, that they have a little accent, like, what's going on, buddy? I tried the idea of just give them a name, there's Dennis.
Oh, yeah.
To sort of familiarize myself with them. But I'd like to think they don't bother me as much as they used to. But have you heard about the super rats
No.
So I was doing pretty well with my little phobia. And then, have you heard of the COVID-19?
Maybe once or twice.
I heard about that one.
So,
is that a rat?
Yeah. Well, kind of, because as you can imagine, rats have been for, as long as our society has existed, eating in restaurant dumpsters.
Right.
And so since the restaurants haven't been open and they haven't had their usual food source, they've been resorting to muricide, which is not a suburb of Summerside. It is the term for rat murder.
I was gonna guess that but that is so crazy.
That's horrifying.
Well, just the side, really. It kind of
kind of gives it away. So they've been eating each other, and rival rat gangs have been sort of squaring off and eating each other in the streets.
Oh my god! And
the winners or survivors of these battles are being known as the super rat. So they're saying there's going to be this whole new breed of rat that is tougher than ever. And I'm sure you've seen footage of rats joining in a train to trick like a big snake, for example, into thinking that they are a predator to be feared as well. So 10 or 12 rats join together.
That's real? You're saying that's a real thing?
Wow.
Yep.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Oh,
but
I know.
You mean like rat centipede kind of thing? Like that?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Exactly.
Oh
that's disgusting.
What a horrifying idea.
So they're doing that around Halifax? Just rat centipedes or just...
I haven't seen that. I've seen like night vision kind of video in New York City of rat trains. I don't know what they're called. Rat snakes. I'm uncomfortable with both of those words individually. I'm uncomfortable with that phrase.
Rat snakes.
Oh.
Rat snakes.
Sounds like a 50s greaser gang.
It does.
Yeah, it does. Oh, the rat snakes.
Yeah. I think they were fighting the outsiders, weren't they?
Yeah, an unreleased scene from Greece.
Yeah, exactly.
The rat snakes.
One question that I was going to ask you is, have you ever had a dream that has stuck with you, but you already kind of answered it in your rat dream?
I had a good one, though. In fact, there were a couple of good ones, and these are from when I was a kid in Sherwood, PEI. Mm-hmm. I had one dream that is pretty common and maybe a little cliche, that I was flying, but I was flying over, there was a lawn bowling rink? No. Field? No. Pen?
The pen.
What are they called? Track?
Alley?
No. Alley? No.
Lawn. It must be an alley.
Pitch? We can go pitch.
Yeah.
There was a lawn bowling pitch in the field kind of behind our street, and a big set of monkey bars and stuff, and Sherwood Elementary School, where I went, was there also. And I had a dream that I was flying over that field.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And that was a recurring dream, and loved the feeling of it. None of the fear, all of the joy of flying.
Right.
The thing that I remember vividly about this flying dream is that it's what I would call POV, like from my point of view. So do you guys usually dream where in film style, where you can see yourself in your dream, or is it usually your POV?
For myself, for my dreams, it's always in my point of view. But I always find, looking back on memories that I've had throughout my life, that it's kind of like a film style. Like I'm viewing this thing that's happened to me from a third point of view.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was something really weird. And when I tried to describe it to someone for the first time, they're like, I don't understand anything that you just said, but cool.
I think the term for that is muricide.
Yeah.
Imagine that word meant the same thing for both of those things. So this flying dream was point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The second recurring dream I had when I was a kid, and now we're really going there, digging into things. I've always been very into textures, even as a young boy. I remembered liking things that were soft. I liked wearing them and things against my skin. Mm-hmm. So I had a dream where I was in the Sherwood Sportsplex, bouncing up and down on a trampoline, and maybe you guys can analyze what this means. And the stands was filled with women.
Okay.
And they were throwing 1 foot square, swatches of silk on me till I couldn't jump anymore.
I mean,
recurring dream, super weird.
How old were you?
7,
8. Wow.
Yeah. And to be clear, there was nothing erotic about it. It was very textual, not sexual.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It was
Like
it was a textile
yeah, like
thing,
a wholesome dream.
When they were throwing them at you,
like,
were they hitting you?
hitting is such a violent word.
Okay.
They were like
Landing, yeah.
on me
Right.
Softly
and
caressing.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
But it was
like handkerchiefs.
It was very much a sensual thing. Analyze that one.
Yeah.
Bobs.
All right. We'll get an expert in here because I don't know if I even want to touch that at all. Yeah.
I don't want to taint something that's so good.
Yeah. So do you notice that you had more dreams when you were younger, and now as you get older, less and less dreams? Or dreams that you remember anyway?
I haven't really thought about it in these terms or for this reason until just now. But I would say I sleep through the night overall less than I ever did because we have a puppy, because we have young girls, because I probably have more on my mind. So maybe I don't get into a deep enough sleep to get dreams going. I noticed that we've been watching this show on Netflix that's super violent, Animal Kingdom.
Right.
And it's sort of a gangy, Sons of Anarchy, hardcore kind of show. So we watched that before bed. So I've been having some sort of violence-fueled dreams. Not that I'm a victim of or party to, but just sort of violent content,
Right.
which I'm sure is directly because of watching that before bed. But I would say, generally speaking, I don't dream as much as I used to.
Right. Yeah, well, many adults often don't get into the stage of REM sleep, which is the only time that you do dream. Most of us are floating around like the before and after stages.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
Cool. I also read somewhere recently the hours of sleep you get before midnight are much more valuable and restorative and all that stuff. So I don't get to bed much before midnight anymore either. The weird thing is I used to more. But now by the time the girls go to bed and stuff and Carol and I hang out for an hour or two, it's the only time we have to really visit and catch up in the run of the day.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of sleeping less than I ever have. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, it could.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's that all my dreams have come true.
Maybe, yeah. You can't dream anymore.
Right?
Have you ever found any inspiration through your dreams?
Yes, but I can't think of a good one.
Right.
For example, I had a dream that there was a guy named Packlebell, and he was a photographer, and his camera was a Canon, and he was at a camera store getting it fixed, and the guy behind the counter said, "Packlebell's Canon?" Like, what a long, terrible way to go for a dumb joke. And like the kind of creative, in quotes, idea that when you wake up, you're like, no, that's never going anywhere beyond the far recesses of my brain. But when you think about the number of elements that had to come together for that joke to kind of make sense, like the puzzle pieces that had to mesh for that terrible idea. It does say a lot about the forces at play while you're sleeping.
Yeah. Or just your own comedic genius.
I guess so.
I don't know if you're giving yourself enough credit.
That's I like that.
So you made your first television appearance when you were 15 on Street Sense.
Yeah.
And did you always dream of a career in TV and comedy when you were growing up?
It's a weird thing because I started in my career so young that I hadn't even really considered what my dream would be or what I wanted my life to look like. I thought when I was younger than that, I wanted to be a stockbroker. And I wanted to play classical guitar in like a little bistro kind of nights and weekends.
Interesting.
I think the stockbroker thing really had more to do with like probably the only exposure I'd had to it is clips of those guys on the trading floor who are throwing up those little tickets and wringing their hands in despair.
Yeah.
Right.
Like maybe in hindsight, it was sort of the drama of that appealed to me.
Right.
So in a weird way, it wasn't acting or playing a character. I don't think it came as much of a surprise to people in my life that I ended up doing something like this for a living. But it just sort of happened, and I just sort of kept taking step after step, and suddenly it's been 30 years.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So in retrospect, it was the perfect choice for me, but it certainly wasn't one I actively pursued. You know, when we were doing Jonovision and we'd have people come in to audition to be on sketches, one of whom was Ryan Gosling.
Right, yeah.
Like they were already as teenagers actors and had agents and were out there on the hustle.
Yeah.
I never had that.
Well, I mean, it would be hard to have that too, coming from Prince Edward Island. At that time, though, you moved to Halifax, and you would have been there. There's agents there, but still, I mean, the East Coast scene, I don't imagine there would be lots of agents for young actors in Halifax at that time.
No.
Yeah.
But as you know, I mean, as you know, in your business, there's an advantage to coming from a small pond.
Definitely.
Because all the other fish are willing to kind of pitch in and help each other out. And that's something, especially now at a point where technology is more accessible than ever and where you live in the world is less relevant than ever. I would argue that coming from a smaller place is actually better. I remember the first time I went to St. John's, Newfoundland, it was to work on a low-budget movie, and I was struck by how the props guy would have an art opening of his paintings, and the makeup artist would work the door, and then for her dance show, the carpenters would work the door or build a set. Like, everyone did everything because they had to, and purely for art's sake. And I think there is something kind of nice about coming from a small community in that regard.
Yeah, there's an energy to it, like a real can-do attitude.
Yes.
There is. I mean, the opportunities might be fewer, but the, like for stand-up comics, for example, if you're in London, England, you can go hone your craft and play a show 6-7 nights a week if you want. That's the disadvantage to a small place as a musician, as if I'm telling you something you don't know. But there certainly are advantages, and I would say to that same end, when I was a kid as an actor, there were less parts for kid actors, but fewer kid actors vying for them.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah. I definitely feel that in the music industry too on the East Coast, and especially through organizations like Music PEI. You know, when you go to Toronto and you do things like Canadian Music Week, there's so many bands. It's like thousands and thousands of acts that you're competing against for those however many 200 different agents or label reps or whoever you're going to see. At a Music PEI event, there might be 25 bands, and those same delegates that you wanted to meet with at Canadian Music Week are there, right?
Exactly.
And so, yeah, there is definite advantages to coming from a small place, for sure.
And honestly, Trailer Park Boys taught me that lesson maybe more than anything, because it was made in Dartmouth. It was on Showcase, which was a network that people didn't even know about. It was at a time when the mockumentary wasn't as widely accepted as a device as it is now post The Office and most shows that kind of have an element of interview clips, you know?
Definitely.
And if it could travel from Dartmouth on low rent video all over the world, it was like a great lesson. And it doesn't matter where you're coming from. If it's good, it'll rise above the din and find an audience.
Definitely.
Teamwork like the rat train.
Yeah, exactly. Working together. So you might as well at least be paying that sweet East Coast rent.
Yeah.
Oh my
instead
God,
of treading water at Bay and Bloor.
Goodness.
Trying to make the dream come true. I remember seeing Dire Straits, and Mark Knopfler is one of my favorite guitar players. One of those guys that when you hear a piece of his, you instantly know it's him. And as you know, that's hard to do, create a sound that is instantly identifiable. And yet the guy, Phil Palmer, I think was his name, session guitar player, playing with him on that tour, trading licks, note for note, everything Knopfler does, Phil Palmer's right there with him. And I remember watching them thinking, how does one of them become Mark Knopfler and the other one is Phil Palmer?
Yeah.
It seems so arbitrary in some ways.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the roulette, right? How does Ryan Gosling become Ryan Gosling after appearing on a Jonovision sketch? And I am stuck being Jonovision for the rest of my life.
I don't think that's true. Speaking of Jonovision, when that show first aired, you were 24 at the time.
Was I?
Apparently, according to your Wikipedia. You were. Yeah.
Nice. Wikipedia, which also had my birthday wrong. Every year on October 25th, I get lots of birthday greetings. My birthday is October 2nd, so I don't know how Wikipedia knows that or thought that.
You might have to go in and edit that yourself.
Well, I think you're right that I must have been around 24 because I started on Street Sense when I was 15 and did 7 seasons. I was just about 16, did 7 seasons. And then Jonovision overlapped a little bit. So that sounds about right.
That's what I read anyway. But I also read that there was only 2 writers on the show. You and somebody named Richard Mortimer.
Yeah, Richard Mortimer, in a weird twist, was actually the director of the first season of Street Sense.
Oh.
And we got to work together again on Jonovision. There were a bunch of writers over the years on Jonovision who all contributed good and funny stuff and had their own unique dialects and added to the funny and all that stuff. Richard and I probably did the final pass on everything. But, yeah. So
in the beginning, when it was just you and Richard writing, there must have been a ton of pressure on your shoulders being, only one of 2 writers and also hosting the show. How did that pressure make you feel, or did you feel that pressure at all?
I don't think I did. Jonovision started at a time when there were all these, plate-throwing, Jerry Springer, chair-smashing nightmares on kind of daytime talk shows, and I think that was everyone's sort of shorthand reference point for what a daytime talk show was. So I was mostly worried that it would come out and people would be like, Jerry, 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 like making it, I don't know, low rent or base. And in the early days, the audiences were bussed in against their will from local schools. So people didn't know what it was. Nobody really wanted to be there. It was sort of embarrassing at first. So I was probably more worried about that than whether it was good.
Right.
But it was kind of the wrestling match between the show that we wanted to make, which was a funny show for teenagers, and the kind of issues that CBC wanted us to
touch base on,
cover.
Yeah.
So sometimes we do these issue shows like racism or abortion, and, you have 22 minutes. That's long enough to open the can, let the worms out, and not put any of them back in.
Yeah.
Or were there any ideas that you thought should have made the show that were scrapped?
I wouldn't say specifically. Generally, I liked it better when the show was funny versus when it was earnest. And what happened was, it's hard to book a show with teenagers because you'd be doing a show about my best friend is my best friend, and then you'd book the kids a week before, and then the night before they'd be like, you know what? I hate Tyler. I can't come on a show about best friends because we had a big fight.
Yeah.
So trying to book the guests was a bit of a challenge in that regard. But it was a good reminder because Richard Mortimer, who you mentioned, always would come up with the perfect scenario. What we need to find is a dad who's a logger and his daughter who's an environmentalist, and she's chained herself to his tree cutter.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah. It doesn't exist.
Like a Larry David Seinfeld kind of idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's the difference between producing in your head and what's actually out there and available to you.
Yeah. Getting back to dreams, have you ever had a lucid dream?
What do you mean by that?
You are in a dream and you realize that you're in a dream and then can have control of the dream.
Whoa. Is that the term for that?
Yeah.
So
it is.
It's something that can happen naturally on its own, or it's something that you can kind of work yourself up to in your dreams.
No way.
Yeah.
Like a choose your own adventure kind of dream?
Exactly.
Yeah.
First of all, I didn't know that's what it was called. Second of all, I didn't know it was possible.
Yeah.
The odd time I've had a 2-parter and was pretty proud of that. When you wake up for a minute, you have to use the restroom or something, and you're like, you know what, I just have to get back to bed because I wouldn't mind picking up that dream where I left it.
Yeah.
I've had those. I have never had a lucid dream. Have you guys?
I had one, yeah.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I was walking through this, I don't even know what it was. It was some sort of empty hotel. And I just kept opening doors. And over again, I would open the door, and whatever I was thinking about before I opened the door would show up on the other side of the door. And so I just came up with something really crazy in my mind, like something like, oh, there's trapeze artists hanging from the ceiling, and there's a big circus on the other side. And if exactly what I pictured is on the other side of this door, I must be dreaming, because there's no way that it would actually be exactly what I thought of.
So you had control of that dream?
I did, yeah. And so I opened the door, and on the other side was exactly what I thought it was going to be. And then so I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do now that I know that I'm dreaming? And I instantly went for flying. But interestingly enough, in the dream, even though I had control, I tried a couple different stances. I tried the Iron Man stance with like my hands down to my side. And that worked a little bit. I got like a foot off the ground. And then I tried...
Oh, a worm burner.
Yeah, it wasn't...
That's a low flight.
I know, yeah. So I tried another one. Which was 2 hands above my head, like, classic...
Old-fashioned Superman.
Yeah. Well, I thought Superman was 1 arm above his head. Is it not?
I think he did both.
He did,
Right.
yeah.
I think he was ambi-armsterous.
Yeah.
I think he practiced Muricide, which is the art of flying with either one or both hands over your head.
Yeah. That definition is really confusing. Yeah.
You look it up and it says it means whatever you want it to.
Yeah.
Catch-all term.
It's a lucid definition.
But what worked for me, though, was 1 arm above my head. And as soon as I did that, I just took off. And I just was flying around. But I actually crashed into the Hillsborough River, which was kind of disgusting. But anyway, I thought it was really interesting, though, that in my lucid dream, I still had to learn how to fly.
Right. Mm-hmm. Interesting. And why wouldn't you go for, like, I don't know, the best food you've ever had, or something more adult, or winning the lottery? Like, flying is cool, but why didn't you swing for the fences, I wonder?
I don't know why. I mean, I can get good food and I can win the lottery potentially. In real life, I can never fly.
Yeah, true story.
Yeah.
I get that.
So with lucid dreaming, either you have like really great ones where most of the time people are just doing whatever they want to. You can also have like sleep paralysis, which more so walks on the line of nightmares. So have you ever had, like, aside from the rat train, which is a horrifying dream and real concept.
Yeah, that's not even a dream. That's a horrifying reality.
Have you ever had a nightmare that's absolutely shook you to your core?
Not that I can think of. What I've had more often is the kind of dream that was so real that when you wake up the next day, you're kind of still mad at the person who was involved. Like, even though you kind of know, it's like my fear of mice. Right. I know intellectually and rationally that they're afraid of me and they're not going to hurt me and all that stuff. Even if you know it was a dream, you can intellectually understand that, but you still feel sort of skeptical or jealous of your partner who cheated on you in the dream or whatever, one of those things.
Yeah, I've had those kind of dreams before too.
Yeah, I can remember having more of those than actual, like, bolt upright, Or as Bruce Springsteen said, wake up with the sheet soaking wet and a freight train running through the middle of my head. Never had those.
I wonder if that feeling of anger is like a chemical reaction and your brain is actually releasing those same kind of chemicals as it would be releasing if you were awake and you found out news like that.
Whoa.
And then when you wake up, then your body is still kind of feeling that, and that's why you still have it. I don't know if that's
speculation.
I don't know if that's true or not.
I could imagine that it would be the same, those dreams where you feel like you're falling and then all of a sudden you jolt up and that's real adrenaline.
Yeah, exactly. So it must,
well, I've had those before for sure, where, don't they say if you hit the ground in your dream and you don't wake up, then you die?
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Have you ever had one of these dreams where your mom's saying, hey, wake up, time for school, and it's incorporated into your dream?
I had one of my alarm clocks when I was in high school made its way into my dream as I want to say like a 20-foot tall blue jay that was just screaming the alarm clock noise, and that's how I woke up.
Whoa. I've tried in the past sometimes to look at dream dictionaries and see what the symbolism is of, like, vermin or whatever, and it's kind of like your horoscope.
Right.
If there's something you're actually looking to get out of it or read into it,
You can find it,
it's there.
Yeah.
But generally it's kind of broad. Like the way they still sort of analyze some mental health challenges. Like, are you tired sometimes and occasionally irritable? Ooh, yeah. Like it's kind of dated and vague.
It's like you could have diabetes.
So I found Dream Dictionary the same way. Did you dream about a mouse? There's a good chance you're hungry sometime today. Yep.
Nailed it. I noticed that you have a slide in your house.
Yes.
Whose idea was that?
Well, I found an article on the internet called Slide Stairs, They're Back.
Oh.
And I showed it to my wife. First of all, we were like,
they were
back.
Oh.
Like, of course, the slide stairs era of the 1960s.
Perfect.
So we had this kind of space that was like a weird size. It was kind of too big to go ignored, but too small to just call it a closet. So my wife was like, let's put a slide in our house. So we found a guy who builds stairs for a living. He's a real student of the craft and really into it.
Right.
And he built it like a canoe. So it's like strips of wood, tiny strips, glued together so it can bend.
Wow.
But it was supposed to be a spiral staircase, and then the building inspector said it had to be sweeping. So it's really fast.
Yeah.
But it really depends, because wood is a living, breathing thing. It depends what time of year it is. Sometimes it's moist. Sometimes it's fast. Sometimes it's sticky. Sometimes it's silky, like the dreams I had when I was 7.
The real reason for the slide in the house.
Yeah, it's not sexual at all. When you were working on Trailer Park Boys, the character of J-Roc, I always thought that was written by you or created by you. That's not true, though. It's Mike Clattenburg that created that character.
Well, Clattenburg and I worked on Street Sense together, and he went to Cole Harbor High and knew a lot of guys who were like J-Roc, and I went to St. Pat's and knew a lot of guys there that were kind of like J-Roc.
Oh, yeah.
And so we always talked like that around the office on Street Sense, and we would make pages in the CBC building like, hey, you know what I'm saying? Meet me out at the truck, dog. So when he was making the show with the two guys he went to high school with, he suggested I play that character on the show. So a lot of the lines are Clattenburg's, and you know, a lot of it's improv as well, but it was kind of like rap as a second language, RSL, like trying to figure out, okay, what am I trying to say in this improv moment, and then how do I translate it from standard English, from the King's English to this sort of patois that J-Roc spoke with.
Right.
Yeah.
But
you know what I'm saying?
It's pretty easy after however many seasons to kind of slip into it.
Yeah. Well, that was my next question, was how much of J-Roc is actually improv in that show?
In the early days, we had to shoot pretty tight to the script because Showcase wanted to know what they were getting. But over time, they gave us a lot more freedom as the show started to find an audience, just like anything.
Yeah.
So in the later seasons, people would probably actually be surprised how much of it is scripted, but the best moments are always the improv ones.
Yeah.
Because we'd surprise each other as actors, and because it's sort of documentary style, you do really long takes. So just to keep yourself sort of amused, you change it up take to take.
That must be hard, though, to get the actual take, like, and not laugh, never knowing what somebody else is going to say.
It is.
Yeah, I wouldn't have that skill set to hold it back.
Well, you bite the inside of your cheeks, for one. That's a good tactic. And the other thing is, especially when everyone's performing at that level, notice this on Letterkenny a lot, which I'm lucky enough to be working on a little bit these days. The rhythm and pace is so fast because the dialogue's so kind of razor sharp that you just are you have this running monologue like, don't be the guy that blows it, don't blow it, don't blow it, keep it going, keep it going. Because if you blow a line and it's back to the start of a 7-page scene because of something you did, you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. So I know you have a patented trifecta, the Torrens trifecta, which is when you're picking a project, you want to go for 2 out of 3 of these 3 things, which is it's got to be fun, it's got to be challenging, or it's got to be well paid. So I was wondering, when did you develop this trifecta?
I did a gig a few years ago strictly for the money. It was a corporate gig, and my relationship with those has relaxed over the years. I used to be sort of more critical of them and whatever. Now I think if I do gig that maybe I wouldn't choose, but it buys me more time at home or allows me to make donations to things I really care about or do some freebies on a friend's short film or something, then that's not selling out. That's just being smart.
Right. Yeah.
And if you make a living in the arts in Canada, I think it's 5% of people that self-identify as artists actually make their sole living from it. So I did this gig and it didn't go well and the money was really good. And I was trying to think afterwards, like, well, why didn't that work? And it was because it wasn't fun. The people weren't especially nice and it wasn't challenging. And so I started to think about the gigs that I've enjoyed the most. And more often than not, it's the fun, challenging ones, like making something hard with people I really like.
Yeah.
So I realized that the times that I've done something only for the money, and there haven't been that many of them in Canadian show business, it hasn't been satisfying.
Right.
But obviously the way you define fun changes at different times in your life. It's not fun for me to fly to Vancouver for one day at this stage because I have a young family, as I mentioned. Fun for me is a character I've never played or a place I've never been or a place I can take my family with me.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm looking for kicks. That's why Taggart and I have a podcast and we got to write a book. Never gotten to do that before. That was fun and challenging. Didn't do that for the money. Got to make an album. That was fun and challenging. Didn't do that for the money either. But I'm at the age and stage where I'm looking for kicks.
Yeah.
Right. I find that a lot of artists, primarily when they get into the arts, they're doing it for less so like the monetary aspect, but more so on an emotional front, which is kind of where I see the fun and challenging, how it seems to be your main go-to for a lot of the things that you do.
Yeah, and it's a pretty simple lens, especially if you're open to massaging the definition of fun and challenge. I think the money definition is probably pretty set in stone.
Right.
But yeah, I found it really easy when something comes up and you need to answer quickly. Is that fun? And the odd time you get all three, and that's when it's like swinging bells on a VLT.
Definitely. So after all the things that you've done, is there anything that you haven't done that you really want to try?
Great question. The album was something I never imagined I would get to do. Like Taggart and Torrens, there's a prime example. It's not for the money, but I've gotten to tour the country, which I never imagined I would. Got to make an album, got to write a book. It's a creative outlet that can be whatever we want. Once a week, I get to do it from home. That ticks about just every box there is.
Yeah, it's true.
So yeah, I would say the thing that kind of gives me oxygen these days is trying to give a voice to people that might not have it otherwise, or trying to accelerate other people's dreams. Like that is a kick, knowing that I factored in some way into helping in that way.
Right.
Well, you're definitely doing that coming on this podcast right now. So thank you so much.
Thanks, bud.
Yeah. Oh my God. Such a treat. Such a pleasure to have you here. I'm on the new record, Bods. I listened to it. I couldn't choose a favorite, honestly. I really liked You Sellin' I'm Byron. That's
it's hooky.
Yeah, and it's definitely got like Alicia Cara vibes to it.
Yep.
But I really, really loved the score. I thought the idea of Gordon Lightfoot rapping is just hilarious.
Well, that's why with it's a comedy record in quotes, and so it has to be funny. But if we're saying that a different character brings every song to the record, then it has to actually be musically accurate too. If we're doing a Gino Vanelli song from the 80s, it should sound like that.
Yeah.
Right.
And if we're doing a Glace Bay Legion ballad, it should sound and feel like that too, which was the fun challenge musically.
Right.
But then in addition to just sounding like it, which is just parody, it has to actually be a funny notion. So I feel like that was the first nut we really cracked. The idea that Gordon Lightfoot lives across the street from Drake, and Drake producing a track for Lightfoot and it being a beef, like a diss track about Bruce Coburn. Like it just felt like that was the chocolate and the peanut butter of comedy.
Right.
That sort of the intersection that felt right.
Yeah.
So once we figured that out, we were kind of off to the races.
That perfect combination of like truth or an idea that seems believable but is just complete nonsense too. Yeah.
Yes.
On that subject of comedy, like I know you've said that your favorite kind of formula for comedy is overconfident and underqualified. So who do you look to, or who did you look to when you were first starting for inspiration?
Kids in the Hall was always the show in my life that I can watch it whenever it's on. I can flip by in the middle of an episode and watch it to the end. It still makes me laugh. It still holds up. Those were the first characters that I saw in my life that I was like, I get those people. And I feel like they're speaking my language. And then when I got to cross paths with those guys a little bit over the years, that was just inconceivable to me.
Yeah.
But I think the funniest characters always start in some kernel of truth.
Right.
Yep.
Like fish out of water or fish in water. Like those seem to be the two combos. But
Right.
if you look at the characters I've played, like Robert Chilia, Mr. D, and J-Roc, both of them are underqualified and overconfident, and that is just what I find funny.
Yeah.
That and people making mountains out of molehills.
Yeah.
So most of the characters that you create or that you play, like, do you base them off of real people for the most part, trying to find that nugget of truth?
Yeah, I definitely find inspiration in the people that live around me. It's one of the reasons I don't live in a big city. I always say I'm famous in my neighborhood as being the guy who doesn't know how to do anything for himself. So lots of inspiration around me here. And I feel like when you work in a creative industry, you need to fill the well. And the way you fill the well is with real interactions and real exchanges and real people.
Yeah.
And so I draw a lot of inspiration from where I live.
And honestly, I found that with Trailer Park Boys, I found that show so funny because not only, like, you know, you talk about knowing people that are like J-Roc, most characters on that show, growing up in Montague, PEI, like, I knew people that were literal Trailer Park Boys characters. Like, like Ray, for example, rolling around in a wheelchair when he can actually walk to collect disability. Like, I knew people that were doing that.
We know those people. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I think it lands so hard for people. It makes you feel better about your own life.
Right.
And the fact that they're not feeling sorry for themselves kind of makes you feel better. But everyone knows a Ricky and a Julian, and lots of people know a Bubbles, and most people these days know a J-Roc.
Yeah, definitely. Over the course of your career, you know, you've been a writer, actor, musician, songwriter, television and podcast host, and many, many, many other roles and other things that you've done. Is there a favorite for you?
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring this interview home with one word.
Do it.
Because the sun's starting to go down behind the hills, and my wife and I are going to go for a walk because I wasn't able to this morning.
Amazing.
So as I make my way out of this interview, I'm going to leave you with this word. The one thing that I would like to be remembered as is a dreamer.
Oh, that's
Wham,
so
bam.
great. Do you know what we call our listeners on this show? Dreamers.
Dreamers?
Yep.
So
the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
And Jonathan Torrens. Awesome. So before you go, Jonathan, I just want to say, again, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for all the research you did and being so well prepared. I enjoyed it immensely.
My pleasure. But before you go, tell everybody where they can find you online.
Indeed, where? At Torrens Jonathan on the Twitter machine. And you can still hit up my MySpace, page me, fax me if you want, and I'll send you a snail mail back. Hit me up.
Awesome. Will do.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we're out.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dear Dreamers, thank you so much for listening. You can rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe to the Lost in Dreams podcast wherever you're listening from. Make sure to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/Dylan Menzie to find out how you can get access to bonus content, merch, music, and more. Every dollar is so appreciated, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. This show is produced by yours truly, and the music is from my newest record, Lost in Dreams, which you can stream anywhere right now. If you have a dream you want us to know about, send me an email at menzie.dylan@gmail.com and your dream could be featured on the show. Thank you to the Canada Council of the Arts for supporting this project, and I'll see you next week.